Everyone thinks the old lady in the corner does not hear what they whisper, but I heard every single word my son and his new wife said about stealing my house. I sat there in my rocking chair with a knitted blanket over my knees and stared out the window at the sprawling oak trees my husband Henry planted 40 years ago. To them, I looked like a withered leaf just waiting to blow away. To them, I was just background noise. An obstacle. A relic. They thought my silence was weakness. They thought my nodding head meant I was giving up. But I was not giving up. I was loading the gun. Not a real gun, of course, but something much more dangerous in the world of high society and real estate. I was loading the truth. And when I finally pulled the trigger, it was going to blow their perfect little world into a million pieces. It all started about 6 months after Henry passed. My son David had always been a good boy, or at least I thought he was. He was soft, though. Henry used to say David had a heart of gold, but a spine of jelly. I never wanted to believe it, but grief has a way of clearing the fog from your eyes. David met Jessica at a fundraiser downtown. She was flashy. She was loud. She had teeth that were too white and a laugh that sounded like glass breaking in a sink. She walked into my ancestral home, the house Henry's grandfather built with his bare hands, and she looked at the crown molding like she was calculating how much it would fetch at an auction. At first, it was subtle. It is always subtle with people like Jessica. She would come over for Sunday dinner and make little comments. She would say things like, "Martha, are you sure you want to keep using this china? It looks so fragile, and your hands are shaking a bit." Or she would say, "Oh, David, look at all this dust. Your mother really cannot keep up with a place this size anymore. It is not safe." I ain't stupid. I knew what she was doing. She was planting seeds in David's head. She was watering them with fake concern and feeding them with fear. And David, bless his gullible heart, soaked it all up. "Mom, maybe Jessica is right," he said to me one evening while we were drinking coffee in the sunroom. "The house is huge. The upkeep is expensive. Maybe you should think about downsizing. To a condo. Something modern. Something without stairs." I looked at him. This house was not just wood and brick. This house was where he took his first steps. This house was where I nursed Henry through his final days. Every scratch on the floorboards had a story. Every creak in the hallway was a memory. "I am fine, David," I told him firmly. "I have handled this house for 40 years. I think I can manage a few more." That was when I made the mistake of arguing. I fought back. I defended myself. And that just gave Jessica more ammunition. A few weeks later, I forgot to pay the water bill. It was a simple mistake. I had the flu, and the envelope got buried under a stack of magazines. The water did not get shut off or anything dramatic like that. I just got a late notice. Jessica found it on the counter. You would have thought she found a dead body the way she carried on. "David, look at this," she shrieked, waving the paper in the air like a flag. "She is forgetting bills now. This is serious. What if she forgets the gas bill? The house could blow up. What if she forgets to pay the insurance? We have to step in. We have to take control of the finances before she ruins everything Henry worked for." I tried to explain. I tried to tell them I had the flu. I tried to show them the checkbook where every other bill was paid on time and in full. But every time I opened my mouth, Jessica cut me off. "Now, Martha, do not get agitated," she said with that sickly sweet voice she used when she wanted to sound like a nurse. "Getting angry is bad for your blood pressure. We are just trying to help. We are doing this because we love you." Love. That word tasted like vinegar coming out of her mouth. David looked at me with those sad puppy dog eyes. "Mom, please. Just let us help. Let Jessica handle the accounts. She is great with money. It will be one less thing for you to worry about." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that Jessica was not great with money. She was great with spending money. I had seen the way she looked at my jewelry. I had seen the new car she drove up in, a car that cost more than my father made in 10 years. But I looked at David, and I saw the desperation. He wanted to please her. He was terrified of losing her. And if I forced him to choose between his mother and his wife, I knew who he would pick. He was a man in love, and men in love are often blind. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I decided to stop fighting. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack. I forced myself to look small. Okay, I whispered. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am getting too old for all this. The relief on their faces was instant. Jessica smiled, and it was the smile of a predator that just cornered a rabbit. That is the best decision, Martha, she said, patting my hand. You will see. It is going to be so much easier for you. From that day on, I became a ghost in my own home. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I agreed to everything. When Jessica said the curtains were outdated and dusty, I nodded. When she said the antique dining table was too bulky and needed to be replaced with something glass and modern, I just said, whatever you think is best, dear. When she suggested they move into the master suite, my bedroom, the room I shared with Henry because the stairs were bad for my knees, I packed my bags and moved into the guest room on the ground floor without a word. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a senile old woman who had lost her spark. They invited their friends over for dinner parties and talked about me like I was not sitting right there at the end of the table. Oh, it is so sad, Jessica would say, sipping her expensive wine. Martha just went downhill so fast after Henry died. It is like her mind just shut off. But we are doing our best to take care of her. It is a burden, of course, but family is family. Her friends would coo and nod sympathetically. You are a saint, Jessica, they would say. Most people would have put her in a home by now. I would just stare at my mashed potatoes and eat slowly, letting a little bit of gravy drip onto my chin just to sell the act. I saw the way they looked at me. Pity mixed with disgust. They saw a helpless old woman. They did not see the fire burning in my gut. They did not see that my mind was sharper than a razor blade. While they were busy picking out new paint colors and planning renovations for a house they did not technically own yet, I was busy too. But I moved in the shadows. Every Tuesday, Jessica went to her Pilates class, and David was at work. That gave me a 2-hour window. I did not spend that time napping. I spent that time on the phone. I called Mr. Henderson. He was Henry's lawyer for 30 years. He was 80 years old, smoked cigars that smelled like burning tires, and was the meanest shark in the city when it came to contract law. When I first told him what was happening, he wanted to storm over there and throw them out on the lawn himself. Martha, you cannot let them do this, he growled over the phone. That house is in your name. The accounts are in your name. They have no legal standing to touch a dime unless you sign it over. I know, George, I said calmly. And I am going to sign it over. There was a long silence on the other end. You are what? I am going to sign the power of attorney papers they are drawing up, I said. But not until you and I make a few adjustments to the family trust. Remember that clause Henry put in back in '95? The one about the Ancestral Protection Clause? I could hear George shuffling papers on his desk. The clause? Martha, that is a nuclear option. That was designed to protect the estate from exactly this kind of situation. But if you activate that, there is no going back. It locks everything down. That is exactly what I want, I said. I want you to prepare the documents. I want the trust restructured. I want the assets moved. And I want it done quietly. They're going to present me with their papers next Friday. They are planning a big family meeting with a notary present. They want to make it official. George chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. So you're going to let them think they are winning, right up until the ink dries? I am going to let them think they have won until the moment they try to spend a single penny, I said. I want everything ready, George. I will come to your office this Tuesday. I will take a taxi. I will tell them I am going to the park to feed the ducks. The plan was set. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I was more docile than ever. I asked Jessica for permission to buy a new pair of slippers. I asked David if it was okay if I watched television in the living room. I made myself small. I made myself pathetic. It was working. Jessica was getting bolder. She started talking about selling off the land behind the house to a developer. We could get $1 million for those 10 acres, she told David over breakfast. Think about it, babe. We could put in a pool. We could go to Europe for a month. Your mom does not need that land. It is just sitting there growing weeds. David hesitated. Dad loved those woods, Jess. He used to take me camping back there. Oh, stop living in the past, she snapped. Do you want to be rich, or do you want to own a bunch of trees? Besides, your mom won't even notice. She barely looks out the window anymore. I was sitting right there, eating my oatmeal. I looked out the window at the woods. I saw Henry walking through the trees. I saw David as a little boy running after him. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. See? Jessica said, pointing at me with her spoon. She is crying over oatmeal. She is totally gone, David. We have to take over. It is the only responsible thing to do. David looked at me, then looked away. Okay, he said softly. Okay. Let's do it. That broke my heart. Hearing him agree to sell his father's legacy for a swimming pool and a vacation. But it also steeled my resolve. I was not just saving the house anymore. I was saving David from himself. He needed to learn a hard lesson. He needed to see who Jessica really was when the money tap ran dry. Tuesday came. I put on my coat and told Jessica I was going to the park. Make sure you do not get lost, she said without looking up from her phone. And be back by 4. We are having people over for drinks. I walked down the driveway, using my cane, taking slow, shaky steps until I was out of sight. As soon as I turned the corner, I straightened my back. I hailed a cab and told the driver to step on it. Mr. Henderson's office smelled like old leather and justice. He had the papers ready. We spent an hour going over every detail. The beauty of Henry's estate planning was that it was built on paranoia. Henry always said, "You never know who is going to try to stick a hand in your pocket, Martha." We activated the dormant company structure. We moved the deed of the house into a specialized holding trust. We transferred the liquid assets, the savings, the stocks, the bonds, into a restricted beneficiary fund. And then the masterpiece, the clause. The Ancestral Protection Clause stated that if the surviving spouse, me, ever felt the estate was under duress or threat of mismanagement, I could unilaterally trigger a lockout. It meant that while I could still live in the house and use the funds for my care, the ownership was effectively frozen. No one could sell. No one could borrow against it. No one could touch the principal. And most importantly, any previous or subsequent power of attorney documents signed by me would be rendered null and void regarding the disposition of major assets unless countersigned by the independent trustee, Mr. Henderson. But here was the kicker. The clause had a silence provision. The activation of the trust did not have to be made public immediately. It could sit there, a silent landmine, waiting for someone to step on it. I signed the papers with a steady hand. George looked at me over his glasses. You know, Martha, you are a terrifying woman. I smiled. I am just a mother protecting her home, George. I took a cab back to the park, sat on a bench for 10 minutes to get some fresh air, and then walked home. When I walked through the door, Jessica was yelling at a contractor on the phone about the price of marble countertops. She looked at me and rolled her eyes. You are late. Go wash up. You look like you have been wandering around in the wind. I went to my room and washed my face. I looked in the mirror. The old woman stared back, but the eyes were bright. The eyes were ready. The big day arrived on Friday. This was it. The takeover. Jessica had set the stage. She had invited a notary public, a man named Miller, who looked like he sweat grease. She had David sitting at the head of the table. She had a stack of documents 3 inches thick in the center of the dining table. She called me in from the garden. Martha, come inside. We have some paperwork for you to sign. I walked in slowly, clutching my shawl. I sat down in the chair they pointed to. It was a side chair, not the head of the table. The symbolism was clear. I was being demoted. Okay, Mom, David said, his voice shaking a little. We explained this before. These papers just give Jessica and me the authority to handle the bills, the maintenance, and the legal stuff for the house. It is just to make your life easier. Jessica pushed the stack toward me. She had already tabbed the pages with little yellow sticky notes where I needed to sign. We just need you to sign here, here, and here, she said, handing me a heavy, expensive pen. It transfers the title management to us and gives us full power of attorney over the bank accounts so we can, optimize the investments. Optimize. That meant spend. I looked at the papers. I saw the words full and durable power of attorney. I saw transfer of deed. I saw revocation of prior directives. They had been thorough. If I had not gone to see George, this would have stripped me of everything. They could have sold the house the next day and legally evicted me. I looked at David. Are you sure about this, son? I asked softly. He looked down at his hands. It is for the best, Mom. Trust us.
Trust.
I looked at Jessica. She was practically vibrating with excitement. Her eyes were glued to the pen in my hand.
Okay, I said.
If you say so. I leaned forward. My hand trembled just enough to look convincing. I signed the first page. Jessica let out a breath she had been holding. I signed the second page. I signed the third. It took 10 minutes to get through the stack. With every signature, Jessica's smile got wider. She was already mentally spending the money. She was already tearing down the walls. When I signed the last page, the notary stamped it with a loud thud. Done, Jessica said, snatching the papers away. It is done. She stood up and stretched, like she had just run a marathon. Well, that is a relief. Now we can finally get things moving. David called the contractor. Tell him we are green for the kitchen demolition on Monday. Monday? I asked. But I cook on Monday. Jessica laughed. A cold, hard sound. You do not have to worry about cooking anymore, Martha. In fact, we were thinking. The guest room is a little cramped, isn't it? We found a lovely assisted living facility just 20 minutes away. It is very high-end. They have bingo and crafts. We think you would be much happier there with people your own age. The room went dead silent. David's head snapped up. Jess, we said we were not going to do that yet, he said. We said we would wait. Why wait? She said, dropping the act completely. Her voice was sharp. The house is ours now, David. We need the space. We're going to start a family, remember? We cannot have your mother wandering around while we are doing construction. It is dangerous. She turned to me, her eyes cold. It is for your own good, Martha. You signed the papers. You gave us control. We are making the decisions now. I sat there looking at them. The betrayal was complete. They did not just want the money. They wanted to erase me. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:55 p.m. I cleared my throat. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Actually, I said, my voice dropping the tremble. I spoke clearly. I spoke with the authority of the woman who had run this family for 40 years. Actually, Jessica, I do not think you will be demolishing my kitchen on Monday. Jessica froze. She looked at me, confused by the sudden change in my tone. Excuse me?
She said.
I stood up. I did not use my cane. I stood up straight, to my full height. I said, you are not touching my kitchen. And you are certainly not putting me in a home. Jessica laughed, but it was nervous this time. Martha, you are confused. You just signed the papers. We own the house. We control the money. It is over. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out a single, folded envelope. No, dear, I said. You have a stack of papers that gives you authority over a standard checking account with about $500 in it. But the house? The investments? The land you want to sell? I tossed the envelope onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of David. Open it, I said. David looked at me, his face pale. He reached out and opened the envelope. He pulled out the document Mr. Henderson had prepared. It had a gold seal on it. What is this? Jessica snapped, trying to grab it. Read it, David, I commanded. My voice cracked like a whip. David's eyes scanned the document. His mouth fell open. The Ancestral Protection Trust, he read. Effective date, last Tuesday. What does that mean? Jessica shrieked. It means, David said, his voice trembling, that Mom doesn't own the house anymore. The trust does. And the trust is managed by. He looked up at me, pure shock in his eyes. Managed by an independent trustee, he finished. Jessica snatched the paper. This is fake. She signed the power of attorney just now. That overrides this. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Actually, if you read paragraph 4 of the document you are holding, you will see that the activation of the trust automatically invalidates any subsequent authority regarding the capital assets. I took a step toward them. In simple terms, Jessica, I said. You just spent an hour watching me sign useless paper. You do not have power over my house. You do not have power over my money. And as of right now, since this house belongs to a private trust, and you are not a named beneficiary. I leaned in close, so close I could smell her expensive perfume. You are trespassing. The silence in the room was deafening. Jessica's face went from red to white to purple. David looked like he was going to be sick. I turned to the notary, who was hurriedly packing his bag. You can go, I said, and take your stamp with you. Then I looked back at my son and his wife. I gave you a chance, David. I gave you 6 months to be a man. I gave you 6 months to stand up for your mother. But you let her treat me like a piece of broken furniture. You let her plan to throw me out of the home your father built. Mom, David stammered.
Save it, I said.
I looked at Jessica. You wanted to run the finances? Fine. The trust provides me with a monthly stipend for my care. The rest is locked tight until I die. And even then, it goes to my grandchildren. Not my son. And certainly not his wife. I pointed to the door. Get out. Jessica screamed. It was a primal sound of rage. You cannot do this. We are married. We live here. Not anymore, I said. The trust has strict rules about unauthorized occupants. You have 1 hour to pack your bags. If you are not gone by 6 o'clock, Mr. Henderson has instructed the sheriff to come by and remove you. I walked back to my rocking chair and sat down. I picked up my knitting. Tick-tock, I said. The explosion that followed was loud, but I did not flinch. I just counted the stitches. 1, 2, 3. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. They forgot that the eye of the hurricane is always quiet. But the storm? The storm destroys everything in its path. The hour that followed was the longest 60 minutes of my life, but it was also the most satisfying. Jessica did not pack quietly. She rampaged through the house like a tornado. I could hear her upstairs, slamming drawers and throwing suitcases onto the floor. Every crash was followed by a string of curses that would make a sailor blush. She was screaming at David, blaming him for everything. She yelled that he was weak, that he was a mama's boy, that he had tricked her into marrying a pauper. I sat in the living room, rocking back and forth. The rhythm of the chair was the only thing keeping me grounded. David walked past me 3 times carrying boxes of their things.
He did not look at me.
He could not. His head was hung so low his chin was practically touching his chest. He looked like a man waking up from a long, bad dream only to realize the nightmare was real. At 5:55 p.m., the front door opened. Mr. Henderson stood there, flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies. George did not mess around. He had timed his arrival perfectly. Is there a problem here, Mrs. Higgins? The deputy asked, tipping his hat to me. I looked at David, who was lugging the last suitcase down the stairs. Jessica was behind him, clutching her jewelry box like it was the Holy Grail. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, but her eyes were still spitting fire. No problem, officer, I said calmly. My guests were just leaving. Jessica stopped in front of me. She looked at the deputies, then at George, and finally at me. For a second, I thought she was going to lunge at me. But she knew it was over. The game was up. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You are a witch, she spat at me. A bitter old witch. You will die alone in this big, empty house, and nobody will care. I didn't blink. Better to be alone in a house I own, I said, than to be a parasite in someone else's. She stormed out the door without another word. David lingered for a second. He looked at me, his eyes wet. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe mom or I am sorry, but the word stuck in his throat. The honk of the car horn from the driveway cut him off. Jessica was waiting. He turned and walked out into the cold evening air. The door clicked shut behind him. The deputies tipped their hats and left. Mr. Henderson stayed for a moment. He walked over and poured 2 glasses of sherry from the sideboard.
He handed one to me.
To the victor, he said softly. I took the glass, but my hand was shaking again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching sadness. To the victor, I whispered. We drank in silence. Then George squeezed my shoulder and left. That night, the house was silent. It was a different kind of silence than before. Before, the silence was heavy with their judgment. It was the silence of me holding my tongue. Now it was the silence of space. It was the silence of freedom. But Lord, it was also the silence of a mother who had just severed a limb to save the body. I walked through the empty rooms. I went into the kitchen where Jessica wanted to smash my cabinets. I touched the countertops. They were cold. I made myself a sandwich and ate it standing up. I did not cry. I had done my crying months ago. Now, I just felt tired. Deep in my bones tired. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal noise. Jessica did not give up easily. I knew she wouldn't. Greed is a powerful fuel. She found some bottom-feeder lawyer who filed a suit claiming I was mentally incompetent. They claimed I had been manipulated by Mr. Henderson. They tried to argue that the Ancestral Protection Clause was invalid because I did not understand what I was signing. It was laughable. Mr. Henderson had recorded the entire signing session on video. We played it in the deposition room. There I was on the screen, clear-eyed, sharp, asking detailed questions about the trust structure. The judge took one look at the footage and dismissed the case with prejudice. He also ordered Jessica to pay my legal fees. That was the nail in the coffin.
Rumors travel fast in our town.
I heard from the ladies at the grocery store that things were not going well for the happy couple. Without my money to burn, the cracks in their marriage turned into canyons. They were living in a cramped apartment on the other side of town.
He explained his plan. He wanted to lobby Congress for a bill that would mandate emergency care regardless of immediate financial verification, backed by a federal fund that he was helping to seed. He called it the Henderson Act. But he needed a face for the campaign. He needed someone who had lived it. Someone who had been fired for doing the right thing. He said, "I want you to testify, Sarah. I want you to tell your story to the Senate." I froze. Me. Sarah Miller from Ohio. Talking to senators. I said, "Robert, I am just a nurse. I am not a politician. I do not know how to talk to those people." He put a hand on my shoulder. He said, "That is exactly why you are perfect. They do not need another slick lawyer. They need to hear the truth. They need to hear about the man in the flannel shirt who almost died because of a spreadsheet." So I did it. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a hearing room in Washington, D.C. The lights were bright. The cameras were rolling. I was wearing a navy blue suit that I bought for the occasion. Behind me sat Robert and, surprisingly, Mike, the security guard, who I had hired as my head of security. The senator at the head of the table was a stern man with white hair. He looked down at me over his glasses. He said, "Ms. Miller, your actions were technically theft. You stole hospital property. You violated policy. Why should we view you as a hero and not a liability?" My hands were shaking under the table. I took a deep breath. I thought about Mr. Henderson gasping for air. I thought about the Martinez boy. I thought about Mrs. Gable and Vance and all the people who forgot what it means to be human. I leaned into the microphone. I said, "Senator, you are right. I broke the rules. I stole 2 vials of antibiotics. And if I had followed your rules, a man would be dead." I looked directly into the camera. I said, "We have built a system that treats healthcare like a luxury product. We check wallets before we check pulses. We worry about quarterly earnings instead of human suffering." I was fired for saving a life. That should not be possible in this country. A policy that kills people is not a policy worth following. It is a crime. And until we change that, until we decide that a human life is worth more than a line item on a budget, we are all guilty. The room was dead silent. I could hear the cameras clicking. I continued. I said, "I am not asking for a medal. I am asking you to make sure that no other nurse has to choose between their career and their conscience. I am asking you to pass this bill so that when someone falls down, we help them up. We do not ask them if they can afford the hand." The video of that testimony went viral. It got millions of views. People started sharing their own stories. The pressure on Congress was immense. The Henderson Act passed 6 months later. It was a victory. A huge one. But the moment that mattered most to me wasn't the signing ceremony. It wasn't the magazine covers or the interviews. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at Mercy General, about a year after I took the job. I was walking through the lobby. I saw a young nurse, new hire, arguing with a billing clerk. The clerk was shaking his head, pointing at a computer screen. The nurse was holding a chart, looking desperate. She looked like she was about to cry. I stopped. I watched. The nurse slammed her hand on the counter. She said, "I do not care what the computer says. That patient needs a CT scan now. If you will not authorize it, I am going to take him down there myself and scan him, and you can bill me for it later." The clerk looked at her. He looked scared. He typed in the override code. I walked over. The nurse saw me and froze. She thought she was in trouble. She thought the boss was going to yell at her for causing a scene. She said, "Ms. Miller, I am sorry. He needed it." I smiled at her. I saw myself in her. I said, "What is your name?" She said, "Emily." I said, "Emily, do not ever apologize for doing your job. You did exactly the right thing." I took a pin off my lapel. It was a small gold pin with the Henderson Group logo on it. I handed it to her. I said, "Keep fighting, Emily. We have got your back." I walked away, heading toward the exit. The rain was coming down outside, just like the day I was fired. But this time, I wasn't carrying a cardboard box. I wasn't crying. I walked out to the curb where my car was waiting. Mike held the umbrella for me. He said, "Good day, boss." I looked back at the hospital. I saw the lights in the windows. I knew that inside, people were being taken care of. I knew that because of one choice, one scary, reckless choice to help a stranger, thousands of people were going to be okay. I looked at Mike. I smiled. I said, "Yeah, Mike. It was a good day." I got in the car. We drove off into the rain, but the world didn't look so gray anymore. It looked like there was hope. And that is all we ever really needed.